Hey everyone, it's time for yet another installment in this series exposing the disgusting Christian propaganda mill, Discovery Institute. I've torn through 5 of these jerks so far, and there are still a few more heavy hitters to get through, but I felt compelled to do something else first. As you all know, I expose people who lie about science, which every DI charlatan certainly does. But I ran across something recently that will help me remind you why they are especially vile and must be urgently exposed. They are not like some electric universe clowns conjuring up fake physics to make a buck. They are not simple snake oil salesmen peddling supplements. They are part of a concerted and well-funded effort to erode the separation of church and state and transform America into an authoritarian Christian theocracy, like Saudi Arabia, but for Jesus instead of Allah. Allow me to demonstrate. A while back, I saw this tweet from Stephen Meyer. Scientism is leading the dangerous expansion of government, the dramatic rise of censorship and mass dehumanization, all in the name of science. In this free report, we highlight 3 important consequences and give 5 simple suggestions of what each of us can do. And then the copy. Are we entering an era of totalitarian science in the age of Biden? Make no mistake, our civilization is in crisis right now, a crisis tied to an abusive view of science. How we respond will affect the lives of our children and our children's children. What can we do? Download your free digital mini-book. Now, of course, I downloaded the mini-book, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. But there's already so much to say. Every single sentence we just read is bursting at the seams with deceptive language for the purpose of manipulating the reader into believing the precise opposite of reality. We start with scientism. This has become a buzzword that the Christian right uses to arbitrarily brand any science they don't like as not science. This sets up their appeal to fear. The expansion of government, which is not happening, that's just how they refer to any government trying to protect its citizens from a pandemic. The rise of censorship, which is not happening, that's just how they refer to educated and responsible citizens pointing out very obvious lies and propaganda. Mass dehumanization, another buzzword with zero relevance here. In this free report. By report, he is referring to what is essentially a propaganda leaflet, like those that were disseminated by airplane to confuse opposition in armed conflicts, whether to incite fear or turn a populace against its leadership. Continuing, are we entering an era of totalitarian science? This is a profoundly stupid sentence. Totalitarianism is a system of government that is centralized and dictatorial and requires complete subservience to the state. Science is not a government, so this doesn't mean anything. Let's be charitable and pretend that they meant it as a metaphor. Is the scientific community centralized? No, it is distributed around every civilized nation in the world, with some scientists working in academia, some in federal positions, and many in the private sector. Is it dictatorial? No, any scientist can research anything they want. If they don't do anything useful or interesting, nobody will care and funding will eventually run out. It's merit-based, just like capitalism is supposed to be. To reiterate, there is no unifying body that governs all of science. In reality, every totalitarian government has been blindly tribalistic and nationalistic, something which is descriptive of fundamentalist religion, not the scientific community. And of course, the age of Biden is sprinkled in arbitrarily as though the status of science depends on who is president because the target demographic of ultra-conservative Christians are programmed to despise any Democratic president, and the mere mention of his name will trigger them to attention. Next, our civilization is in crisis due to an abusive view of science. Yes, that's right. Because of growing anti-science sentiment, larger portions of society are denying utterly trivial and irrefutable scientific principles and ignoring experts in their respective scientific fields, all in favor of lying, unqualified charlatans. So this sentence is actually true. And it's also true that how we react to this very serious crisis will affect future generations of humanity. But you won't be too surprised by who the DI targets as the villain here. Just for a little little more context, here's another tweet from the DI. Why we can't trust the science journals. That's right, folks. You know those science journals? The ones with all the actual, real, peer-reviewed science? The ones that all the DI members desperately pretend they have been published in to seem like real scientists? Well, you can't trust them. Not one bit. Any real scientist who publishes real science, it's a scam. So remember, if you ever hear any real science from a real science journal, ignore it. Only listen to us, the fake scientists who lie to you. The level of gaslighting here is off the charts. The DI has officially abandoned any attempt at seeming like credible scientists, as they are now accusing literally all scientists of being untrustworthy. They've become a psychopath boyfriend manipulating their young naive girlfriend. Baby, you can't listen to anyone but me. Your parents, your friends, your therapist, they're all lying. They're jealous of our love. Only listen to me. I'll keep you safe. While I'm keeping you safe, here are a bunch of rights you no longer have and rules you have to follow, or you'll be publicly executed for heresy. Indeed, our civilization is in crisis. This is because of the high level of credulity of the general populace and the ease with which lies can spread on the still relatively new internet by anyone who seeks to spread chaos or make a buck. Poor science education, religious indoctrination, Russian trolls, there's a mixed bag to blame, but this is the crisis, nothing like what the DI describes. Not surprisingly, this attack on literally all of science is accompanied by an attack on the entire university system. I subscribe to the DI brainwashing emails, and this is one they sent recently. Do you have college-aged kids? Well, watch out for those terrible colleges. They're all Satan centers where they're taught ritualistic sacrifice. Just listen to this one student that is totally a real person about their experience at University of Sodom and Gomorrah. She says the college almost ruined her. All the professors are godless heathens that never even mention Jesus during their physics lectures. Stay away from real colleges, you guys. Send your kids to some loser dump cash grab like Sattler College, where they can keep getting brainwashed well into adult age by loser frauds like Jonathan McLatchie. It's painfully easy to deconstruct this pile of horse manure. The idea that college professors are telling students that God doesn't exist because science says so is idiotic. That has happened 0 times. Not to mention the fact that enormous percentages of college professors believe in God, as do the students. As it turns out, being religious and studying science is no problem. Being a fundamentalist preacher who wants religious scripture to replace science is a big problem, and when they don't get their way, they throw tantrums about censorship and freedom of speech. Because to them, freedom means the right to impose their delusional worldview onto others, by force if necessary. Anyway, let's get to this adorable leaflet, The Rise of Totalitarian Science. It's got some syringes and a stock image of a doctor with a stethoscope on it. Can you guess what it'll be about? Anyway, it was written by John G. West. Who the hell is that? Ooh, a vice president and senior fellow at the DI. And he manages the Center for Science and Culture. That translates to head brainwasher in charge of writing the propaganda for the brainwashing. You can see that here on the next page, which describes the mission of the center. They claim to somehow do research without any research facilities, right before admitting that their whole intent is to enlist young impressionable minds into the cause and brainwash the gullible masses. You know, for academic freedom, like the kind at actual universities they pretend are all bad because they actually do science. His experience studying political science likely helped him learn about how other societies have successfully implemented propaganda so that he could get good at it too. And of course, all of that knowledge of politics enables him to spew lies about biology, all of which have Darwin in the title, which is predictably all the standard bullshit about how social Darwinism has anything whatsoever to do with biology and the tired tropes regarding eugenics. Well, we don't have time to comb through all of that garbage, and all of it has been debunked 1,000 times by other people. But let's dive in and see what this latest campaign is all about, shall we? Introduction. Lockdown. Dun dun dun. I can already feel the tentacles of the authoritarian government creeping up my back, don't you? Yes, that's right. The response to the COVID-19 pandemic was totalitarian. Now, hold on, millions of people died of COVID, so let's nip that in the bud right now. If you know people that died, you're entitled to your opinion. But let's just go ahead and talk to the people who will be more receptive to this script. Ready? Number 1, the dangerous expansion of government power in the name of science. Yes, that's right. We all remember when the National Guard was patrolling the streets and forcing everyone to stay in their home and starve to death at the threat of public execution. Right? No? This script is ridiculous. In the first few months of the pandemic, nobody knew how deadly the virus was. In certain countries like Italy, thousands of people were dying per day every single day. The idea that a government should take no steps whatsoever to curb the death toll and protect its citizens is completely insane. Citizens can't just do whatever they want if it puts others in danger. That's the main reason governments exist, to ensure the stability of society. That's what cities initially were, a place where you could live within huge walls with armed guards at the top so you would be safe from the chaos outside, and you paid a tax for the privilege. Things aren't quite as grim in this modern era, but the principle is the same. There are rules that we follow for our own convenience and protection. Should people be allowed to drive on the left side of the street? Should they be able to run red lights without consequences? No, because if we all drive on the right and obey traffic lights, people can safely and efficiently get to where they're going. Anyone who whines about freedom in response to something so trivial is a little toddler. The pandemic was not really any different. With a new and poorly understood airborne communicable pathogen, steps should be taken. Interpersonal contact should be minimized. And when proximity is absolutely necessary, masks helped minimize the odds of transmission significantly. It's not that hard to understand, and there was nothing authoritarian implemented. Propaganda peddlers like to revise history and post pictures pretending that cops are telling a single person alone on the beach that they're getting arrested, and that never happened a single time. People were going to the store, they were going to parks, there was nobody monitoring your travel at gunpoint. That's the sentiment John wants you to recall, even though it simply didn't happen. As far as mandates and discrimination, we will get to that in a moment, as it obviously pertains to vaccines. But this bit here about how they were imposed is ridiculous. He seems to think that federal policies require open public debate to be implemented. For someone who studied political science, that was an unbelievably stupid thing to say. The public doesn't write laws, and there are no public debates to approve them. This talk about a state of emergency is meaningless. I live in California, and we've all done pretty much whatever we wanted the entire pandemic. Most people are responsible and enacted as much social distancing as possible during the first year or so, but we all did our shopping and visited with friends and all that. We just avoided huge crowds like concerts and sporting events when they came back, which very obviously spread COVID like wildfire. And that only lasted for another year or so. By mid-2022, everyone was doing everything normal again, so citing this date in early 2023 doesn't mean anything. Then he puts science in quotation marks as though there is no logical scientific basis in trying to limit interpersonal contact to minimize the spread of a virus. Well, the virus can only spread when people are right next to each other. Even a small child can understand that. So yes, anyone who pretends that's a baseless endeavor is blatantly anti-science. This section ends without John articulating a single coherent thought about how any rights were actually violated or how any government action was not for the direct purpose of diminishing the spread of the virus. The point to be made here is simple. Before modern medicine, an epidemic was interpreted as God's displeasure with sinners, and if one was lucky, the response was prayer and incantations. If not so lucky, a bunch of witches were burnt at the stake. With that for context, John is trying to pretend that the American government enacted some unprecedented level of authoritarian control in its response to the pandemic, which is flat out idiotic. Democracies enacting temporary emergency measures goes all the way back to ancient Greece. And in the modern era, many times governments around the world have decreed mandatory vaccinations. Yes, they actually forced their citizens to get vaccinated. This is how we eradicated smallpox, which killed billions of people. The Jenner immunization protocol was so successful, and smallpox was such a nightmare that the UK did this in 1853, and most other countries followed, which is why smallpox doesn't exist anymore. The constitutional authority of these regulations was even upheld in the United States Supreme Court in 1905. If you want to make the argument that governments shouldn't have done any of that and keeping smallpox around is okay with you, you're free to hold that ridiculous backwards opinion. But the idea that we saw new levels of government overreach with these vaccines is objectively wrong. People have been forced to get other vaccines. The population was not forced to get COVID vaccines. And guess what? There were people who didn't like it back then either. People claimed the smallpox vaccine based on cowpox would turn you into a cow. Just like people who think Bill Gates is trying to put a microchip in you today. People are no smarter or dumber now than they were then. But the government response to the COVID pandemic was objectively less authoritarian than the smallpox response and polio too. Governments are now more tolerant and respectful of individual choice, not less. Anyone who says otherwise has no clue what they're talking about. There is no new crisis and no dictatorial scientism, just an international response to the largest pandemic since the 1918 Spanish flu, which, with the exception of China, was actually quite lax, which is why so many people died from it. Number 2, the rise of censorship in the name of science. Of course, nobody likes misinformation, especially not Discovery Institute, but who judges what constitutes misinformation? People who know what they're talking about. When it comes to communicable diseases, that would be doctors, epidemiologists, immunologists, and so forth. People who study these things for a living and publish peer-reviewed primary scientific literature about them. Not RFK Jr., not fake doctors on Twitter, and not the DI. Yes, experts in a field determine what is true or false about that field. People who don't work in that field have zero business contradicting them, and almost certainly have no idea what they're talking about anyway, so the disagreement is never scientific, but rather ideological. Like people who pretend that biological systems are too complicated to arise naturally, so they must have been designed by a very specific deity. It's lying preachers and their brainwashed minions who say that, not biologists. But of course, this obvious reality doesn't suit John's propaganda. This is where he emboldens the reader. Truth arises from dissenters. That's right, people who challenge the status quo must be right. Virologists study viruses every day, so viruses are definitely real? Forget it. Some jerk on Twitter says viruses aren't real, so he's a dissenting truth teller. Everyone educated for the past 2,000 years has known that Earth is a sphere? Get out of town. It's totally flat. You just got indoctrinated. They are literally using the same script as flat earthers. But of course, it's all in the name of free speech. In reality, anyone who brings up free speech with regard to misinformation is an idiot. All free speech means is that you can't be put in jail for the things you say. In certain countries, if you publicly denounce the government, you can be put in jail. In America, you can't. I can write a book called The President is a Gigantic Piece of Crap. I can talk about what a stupid, ugly jerk he is on every single page, and I can publish that book. I can't go to jail for that because we have freedom of speech. That has nothing to do with how we as a society should treat malicious lies and misinformation. They should be exposed and neutralized. Private social media platforms can and should have guidelines about misinformation and suspend accounts that violate those guidelines. Nobody is going to jail for lying on Twitter, so everyone whining about free speech is a moron. Social media is making the world dumber by the second, and the least these platforms can do is lift a finger to curb the misinformation that's responsible. But of course, John doesn't like how these platforms deal with COVID misinformation, whining about totalitarians. Well, the government doesn't own Twitter or YouTube, these are private platforms. So by pretending that he should get to determine how those platforms are run, he is violating their freedom to determine such details for themselves. How ironic. Of course, nothing he is saying here is real at all. There is no censorship regarding COVID, Darwinian evolution, climate change, any of it. There is science. There are people who lie about science, and there are people who dutifully and accurately point out those lies. Given that the propaganda peddler has zero capacity to actually substantiate their lies, they just cry censorship and pretend they are being oppressed to trigger an emotional reaction. Christian nationalists love to play the victim. For citations, we have the homepage of a website with no further information and a link to propaganda outlet The Daily Wire. You can see the pattern. But back to COVID, John says that messages have been censored because they are disfavored by the government. Would that be the reason, or is it because such messages are objectively false? People claim that the COVID vaccines are experimental gene therapy and that they aren't even vaccines at all. This is a blatant lie peddled by charlatans who target people with no clue what vaccines or gene therapy are. Who cares what any government thinks? It's objectively false. We can cite hundreds of other examples regarding masking, social distancing, the mere existence of viruses and the mechanism by which they infect people, the statistical dynamics of a pandemic, and so forth. Nobody is pushing back on members of the scientific community who have differing viewpoints on the specific details of these phenomena. People push back against charlatans who peddle blatant lies that contradict high school level biology and are immediately recognized as trivially false by anyone with even a mild education in the sciences. Anyone who has their medical license revoked deserves it. These are people like Andrew Wakefield, who fabricated a fake study to try and get the MMR vaccine off the market and peddle his own standalone measles vaccine for profit, along with the £500,000 paycheck from injury attorneys, as we discussed in my anti-vax debunk. He doesn't just deserve to have his medical license revoked, he deserves life in prison for the deaths of many children from measles that ensued after the wave of anti-vax hysteria that followed his fraudulent study and its far less publicized retraction. Crappy doctors who realize they can quadruple their income by lying on the internet also deserve to have their license revoked. In general, people who deliberately spread misinformation during times of international health crisis should be punished because the damage they cause is difficult to overemphasize. This is well documented in the primary literature. Vaccine disinformation leads to vaccine hesitancy, which leads to deaths. If you vandalize a building, you're doing damage. This is against the law. Spreading misinformation also does damage, so it should also be illegal and a punishable offense. It's common sense. So when he complains about charlatans being brought to justice, it doesn't resonate the way he wants it to. He can claim that the fight against misinformation is actually a fight against dissenting voices, but it's just smoke and mirrors. NPR urged to strip doctors of medical licenses who offer dissenting opinions. Oh, the fraud whose emergency certification lapsed, so she was pushing telehealth appointments to make money off of gullible anti-vaxxers? It's always the same. The DI makes this claim about themselves with regards to biology, but anyone who's watched any of this series has seen that they are nothing remotely like scientists with dissenting opinions. Apart from not being scientists, they are malevolent, bad faith actors that deliberately distort information to confuse and manipulate people. There is nothing of substance here. John just whines about consensus, another common tactic of the propaganda peddler. In general, the word consensus has been ruthlessly weaponized by charlatans over the past decade or so. Consensus does not mean whatever view is endorsed by certain government authorities. It means what is nearly unanimously agreed upon by everyone with any clue what they're talking about. The consensus among chemists is that atoms exist. This is what consensus should mean to people. It means what the scientific community is extremely confident about based on mountains of available data. But it's always that pesky reality that gets in the way of the propaganda peddler's agenda. So, without any ability to refute the entire scientific community, they just implant a negative connotation in the word consensus to train the reader to recoil at its sight. Apart from qualifying as classical conditioning, the forced association of one thing with another, this is also the ad nauseum approach to propaganda. Repeat a lie over and over until it is accepted as truth. If all the scientists in a particular field agree on something, it must be corruption. It can't possibly be because it's objectively true. Well, I guess atoms don't exist then. Again, he just blindly asserts that some misinformation is legitimate difference of opinion held by scientists and policy experts, and the citation leads not to actual science, but to a conservative propaganda blog that echoes the same lie. He claims that other misinformation is just true facts that are being suppressed. That may sometimes be true in politics, but very rarely in science. What he pretends is difference of opinion held by scientists is actually just deliberate falsehood. His attempt to back this up is predictably the VAERS database. This is where people can self-report vaccine injuries. First, this didn't exist in the past, so that COVID vaccines should make up such a large percentage of the reports is obvious. Vaccine injuries are not new and are not exclusive to any modern vaccine, but 13 billion COVID shots were delivered worldwide in less than 2 years, so what do you expect? Second, over 90% of the entries describe fleeting chills, local pain, and fever, like you're expected to experience with almost any vaccine. More serious reactions constitute a fraction of a percent of the reports. But most importantly, there is no control over who reports and no way to validate any of the claims. And given the current climate, it's not that hard to believe that the majority of these more serious claims regarding COVID vaccine injuries are fallacious. They didn't seem to get the news that anecdotal evidence isn't actually worth anything, but this database is central to the claims made by anyone who lies about COVID vaccine injuries. This includes all of the fabrications regarding myocarditis and everyone you see on social media convulsing comedically, pretending it was vaccines that made them do it. It's a fire hose of falsehood. Is Facebook combating misinformation or suppressing legitimate criticisms of Big Pharma? The first one, but for some people, you can simply utter Big Pharma and they'll believe anything you say. In reality, the scientific response to COVID was miraculous. The virus was isolated within weeks, and the mRNA vaccines were developed in a year. Studies estimate these vaccines saved over 3 million lives in the first 2 years, and saved the American healthcare system over $1 trillion. Yet all we hear about is how Pfizer made $30 billion. The lack of perspective on the pharmaceutical industry is not a new phenomenon. But it gets worse. Big tech is in on it too. People have had their accounts suspended for voicing the truth. But was it though? You say it is and want people to blindly trust you, but is it the truth really? Let's play a game, John. I'll list some things that someone could say on social media, and you tell me if they should get banned for saying it. What if I picked a random popular food product and claimed that it's poison without basis? Should that be allowed? Isn't that tampering with the economy? How about if I take something dangerous and claim that it's safe? What if I tell people that drinking bleach cures the common cold? Don't worry if you start to feel sick, that means it's working. Drink more. Should that be okay? What if I'm a popular influencer and hundreds of people die as a direct result of that tweet? Is that okay? Freedom of speech, right? No accountability, right? Lies can cause deaths, John. Platforms where those lies are spread should be policing activity and terminating the accounts of people who abuse the platform to spread those lies. So they do that. Call it totalitarian all you want. It's just good practice for a functioning society. You still have Rumble and all the shitty platforms with zero guidelines that nobody cares about, so go exercise your free speech on those for the few dozen people who are gullible enough to follow you. Number 3, mass dehumanization in the name of science. That's right, people aren't humans anymore. Thanks, science. Real quick, let's prime people for the fear tactics by mentioning Nazi Germany right up top. Then let's go straight for the victim card. Aw, anti-vaxxers have been branded as human scum who should be tortured and rot in hell. It's just like eugenics, and let me throw in the word Darwinist for no reason, since we're still here to pretend evolution is evil and not real, in case you forgot. Poor anti-vaxxers. Of course, most of this list of what happened to anti-vaxxers is total fabricated bullshit. Nobody was denied access to food. Nor is it relevant what Gene Simmons said, as that's no different from picking some random anti-vaxxer and quoting them as saying that they hope all vaccinated people explode. This is just page after page of playing the victim, and all of this in the name of science. But what's this? Unvaccinated people are 3 times less likely to get COVID than vaccinated people? No way. Yeah, no way. That's a lie. Off to his citation, case and hospitalization rates were highest among the unvaccinated, then higher in those who had been infected than those who had been vaccinated alone, then lower in those who had been infected than those who had been vaccinated alone, but it says nothing about 3 times, and all of this is ignoring the fact that to get the natural immunity, you have to get COVID, which means you can spread COVID and are susceptible to all the effects of COVID, potentially including severely debilitating long COVID. Vaccines and boosters recommended for all eligible persons, right there with a bullet. Not quite the tone he implied, huh? And of course he references the Florida Surgeon General who fabricated data to push the false claim of higher risk for cardiac issues in young vaccinated men. It was all over the news, it's been dissected to death, and the guy's a fraud, so citing him is a clear admission of being okay with distorting medical information. Well, this really is a dark Orwellian picture they painted, isn't it? So what can we do? Oh goody, they have tips. Alright, number 1, stay informed. That's right. Do you want to understand how vaccines work? Take some courses on biology and immunology. No, that's not it. Oh, a list of pre-approved propaganda outlets that will tell you the lies that suit our agenda. That makes more sense. Evolution and Science Today, also known as Evolution News, which is the Discovery Institute propaganda blog. Mind Matters News, looks neat. Oh, more propaganda operated by the Walter Bradley Center for Natural and Artificial Intelligence at Discovery Institute. And the Epoch Times, a well-known conspiracy peddling propaganda machine. So, the DI says the only sources you can trust are the DI and Epoch Times. That's it. Don't ask any scientist anything ever. Anything you learned in school about basic biology is wrong. Got it? Number 2, when someone demonizes selfish, clueless anti-vaxxers, you shame them. They're stupid, mean jerks who don't understand vaccines like we do. Who cares about the death toll? Stop being mean to me. Number 3, people who want to suppress misinformation just whine about free speech even though that's meaningless. Share some true scientific information that is being suppressed, also known as the lies we use to brainwash you. Insist that these lies are true, and when people explain to you precisely how you're wrong, just whine about free speech some more. Number 4, all those repressive measures? Push back. People in power lightly suggesting that you minimize contact with other humans during a pandemic that is killing millions of people? No way. Go to church as much as possible, especially if you feel sick, and make sure to touch everyone. God doesn't let viruses into churches, so it's safe. And 5, are you someone who votes? Don't vote for people who understand science. Only vote for lying demagogues who are aligned with the fake values we've programmed you to have, and help those liars gain as much power as possible. We wrap things up with some nonsense about a call to action so you can spread this crap to your gullible friends, then a quick Reagan quote since clueless boomers still worship him, and that's all she wrote. With that, we can all clearly see how the DI is enacting their desperate, last-ditch effort to polarize people against science. They are no longer even pretending to push their previous facade that there is internal strife within the scientific community, and many scientists believe in intelligent design. This is now a full frontal assault on the entire scientific community. The goal is for their targets to completely disregard any credible scientist of any kind. And the playbook is just a greatest hits compilation of classic propaganda tactics. First and foremost, complain about censorship. Whatever lies you are peddling, they aren't excluded from rational discourse because they are objectively wrong. You are being censored. All anti-establishment propaganda uses this tactic. The man is squashing the truth. They're afraid of the whistleblowers and the truth tellers. Whether you're spreading dangerous medical misinformation, climate-based propaganda, or lies about astrophysics, it's all the same. The truth is false and my falsehoods are truth, but they are being censored. The irony in this case is that fundamentalist Christians love censorship. Who are the ones that burn books? Who are the ones that wanted labels on the CDs? Who are the ones who try to censor anything they deem as pornographic, like that filthy Statue of David masterpiece? Or any music that they deem unholy at the time, whether Marilyn Manson or the Beatles? Who are the ones that killed subversive individuals when they had the power to do so in darker historical times? Was Giordano Bruno burned at the stake for censoring the Catholic Church? No, he was killed for spreading facts that undermined the church's ability to control the population. Make no mistake, fundamentalists want that power back, and this is their attempt at getting it. The DI is no different. Are comments allowed on their blog? Of course not. Do they groom the comments section of their videos and ban pernicious dissenters? Of course they do. They literally censor profanity on their blog to seem virtuous. What these people actually want is selective censorship. Censor anything that's inconvenient to my cause, but don't censor me. That's not fair. Their lies must spread far and wide, no matter how much they harm society. And they have the balls to pretend that science is some kind of cult of groupthink or forced consensus, when their ridiculous videos literally portray themselves as a cult with anonymous masks, programming their victims from behind the computer screen. The imagery is so on the nose it's unbelievable. It's the same with every source they're prescribing. Epoch Times is a blatant conspiracy peddling propaganda organization that rose to prominence on the basis of a viral marketing campaign that used this precise tactic. Our warehouse was invaded by the government to try and shut us down. Come read what they don't want you to see. Of course, the event was staged, all to push this button in people's minds. If someone is trying to silence them, it must be true. Well, not when the silencing is fabricated and it's actually a script of lies. But it's such a convincing narrative that thousands of people fall for it instantly and incorporate the legitimacy of the source into their core identity. This is how wealthy Christian nationalists are currently trying to take over America. They want to get people to reject every reliable source of information, distrust any legitimate authority or medium. They want to convince people to listen exclusively to them or their list of pre-approved propaganda. Don't listen to science, listen to us. We will tell you what reality is. Trust us. We want to protect you. And to anyone who is shocked by the boldness of this propaganda, you shouldn't be. This was outlined with crystal clarity in the leaked Wedge document decades ago, which John West wrote with Stephen Meyer. They've always known that this was the goal. They are just ramping up their efforts right now because the post-pandemic world is rife with opportunity to sow the seeds of science denial. Fortunately, everyone at the DI is so unbelievably incompetent that their propaganda just ends up making them the target of mockery on YouTube. Their actual influence has been dwindling severely even before I knew who they were and started humiliating them. The only people dumber than them are the wealthy Christian nationalists who pay their salaries because their heads are too far up their own asses to realize how clueless their employees are. Meyer is the best among them, and he's a total joke. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't take them seriously. Although they are a joke today, the current situation with public science literacy is grim. The post-pandemic world is a fertile landscape for anti-science demagogues to capture vulnerable followers. Every attempt to expand their influence should be neutralized. Every time they allude to some sinister plot from the evil scientists to ruin society, we have to show people the truth. The DI is the one doing that. They are the ones who despise freedom of religion because they do not respect our freedom from religion, as they try to cram it where it doesn't belong. Religion does not belong in our public schools. It does not belong in our laws. We will not sit idly by and watch this influence strip away women's rights. We will not allow democracy to be subverted by those who want to take us back to the Dark Ages. They accuse others of what they themselves are doing, and we will not fall for it. We will not give up centuries of social progress only to have our freedoms stripped from us anew. And if you think I'm being melodramatic, think again. Never forget what self-proclaimed holy men did to others when they had the power to do so. If they reclaim any measure of that power, you'd better believe they'll start burning people alive again. That's why we mock these buffoons. That's why we excoriate their pathetic script until the whole world sees what they truly are. Because pearl-clutching defenders of propaganda need to be reminded that no words could ever be as offensive as institutions that devalue human life in the way that these jerks do. So that's it for John G. West, the director of propaganda at Discovery Institute. I see everything you're doing, and I'll continue to expose everything you do until you don't exist anymore. Now I have to get back to debunking your fake science, so to everyone else, I'll see you next time.